Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Teapot Podcast, where I'm spilling the tea on being a small artist and a small business owner. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to plan your month as a small business, and more specifically, how I do it, because I love planners and I just love journaling and all of that stuff that, all that nerdy stuff. I love it. Like when I was in college, I was notorious for toting around my giant planner with me, and that habit is still here to this day, very much so. Has not deteriorated at all. Wow, that was a really rough way to say deteriorate. Whew. Alright, anyway, for the introduction for today, I wanted to talk about something exciting that happened this past week. I got to ship my first order outside of, the US/Canada. I had to figure out tariffs and the codes and all of that stuff. It's super nerdy, but it made me super excited. And so now I have a brand new document in my computer all dedicated to my products and their coordinating tariff codes. And I can't even explain to you how happy that makes my little planner brain. I love it. Anyway, all of that aside, let's go ahead and jump into the tips of how to plan for your small business. So I recommend starting with any planner. Find a planner system that works for you. That is tip number one. And this can be anything that works for you. I feel like a lot of people don't have planners, or they go into the thought of having a planner and it has to look a certain way, it has to feel a certain way, or it has to have monthly spreads versus weekly spreads, or whatever. Whatever the case may be, drop all of those expectations and find what works for you. So one example of this is that if you watched my Plan With Me video that I uploaded on Sunday, I actually talked about how I have a cheap planner from Amazon. It's like a little academic planner. And then I also have my bullet journal. And between those two things, that's what I use to plan. And so my bullet journal, because I have to write out the dates and the times and all of that stuff, I don't like it. That is way too much effort for me. And I wasted probably 2 or 3 years trying to make myself plan that way before I realized I would just give up because it was so hard. That is not what I needed at all. So I gave up on that. And, I use my bullet journal now for purely memory keeping and a creative outlet and journaling through my thoughts and feelings, because I always have a lot of those. And, my planner, my academic planner, is where I'm allowed to be messy, and it can be as crazy as it wants to be. I don't have to worry about it being pretty or anything like that. My planner is just for me. And I would also say for this tip of, finding a planner system that works for you, start cheap. In the very beginning of college, I remember that I spent probably $65-ish on an Erin Condren planner. And while that's really not that much, by today's standards of how much planners cost, back then it was. And, this is 2015 maybe, and, that was quite a bit for me. And I spent all of that money, all of that time making all these custom dashboards and blah, blah, blah. All of that for me to find out that I hated with a passion that vertical spread thing at the time. It just didn't work for me. I had college classes, and I think at the time I was taking 21 college credits. I was also waitressing full-time, and I was working at a daycare part-time, and I had English club and intramural basketball. It was all just too much, and that vertical spread did not work for me. And if I would have started cheap on maybe a knockoff or something like that, I could have found out that spread style just wasn't conducive to my life at the time. Now, sidebar, I do think the vertical spread is really great, and I really, really like it. Now that I only have, a little bit less going on in my life than back then. So this is absolutely not a hate channel for vertical spreads. Absolutely not. But all of that to say, I could have started out way cheaper and found out all of that information for myself, and I think that would have really helped me. Anyway, so whenever you are finding your planner system, I recommend finding one that has a monthly spread, so the entire monthly calendar, all the boxes, all that stuff. Find one that has a monthly spread and one that has a really nice big weekly spread. That way you can write lots. So those are the two spread styles I recommend starting with. And those are pretty standard in every cheap planner that you can get at Walmart, Target, etc. So moving on to tip number 2. In your monthly spread, add any expenses that occur every month. So for example, this could be business insurance or, for me personally, I pay for Canva Pro. I use their background removal tool. So nice. So nice. Oh my God. I used to use Pixelmator Pro, which is basically Apple's version of Photoshop, and that took me so long. It just is not a perfect one-click tool like Canva. So for me, paying that $12.99 or $14.99, whatever it is, that is so worth it for that tool. It's amazing. There was an extra tip for you, I guess. Another monthly expense could be if you have a Shopify or other hosting website. This is going to be a cost that is definitely reoccurring every month, so it's your monthly payment for your shop. Shopify is $40 a month for the, what am I trying to say? $40 a month for the monthly plan. And then obviously for the year, that would just be once a year, but I don't know what the other platforms cost per month, but I'm sure they're all similar to that. So yeah, get all of those monthly dates in your calendar first. That way you know all of those expenses that are coming up before they even come up and they surprise you. Tip number 3, again in the monthly setup, in your monthly spread, pick launch dates and we're going to work backwards from there. So for example, if you know that you have some personal stuff going on and you have all these payments due and blah, 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 and you'd need extra income to help face all of those expenses and all of that good stuff, then definitely plan your launch accordingly. That's one way to think about where you want your launches to fall in the month to help you out with your expenses. Another way is just if you want to keep it kind of consistent for your audience, like if you know around the 20th of every month you want to have a launch, cool. Your audience will know exactly what to expect from you. That's really great too. Or do what you feel. And I've kind of been going along with that one lately. And it's been really great, honestly. I really enjoy having that freedom. And I've also been experimenting with multiple launches per month. So if you guys want another episode on how I do multiple launches per month, totally comment below and I will try to make a whole episode about that. But another thing to think about is whenever you're planning your launch date, you want to make sure you have enough time to create hype. So for me, that is bare minimum a week. And I'm talking a week is pushing it. Like if I only have 1 week to push a launch and hype a launch and share sneak peeks and all of that stuff, that launch is probably not going to be a great one, to be really transparent. I just know for my audience, I need more than a week. And this is something that you're going to have to do some trial by error to figure out because, your audience may like that week. They may get tired of seeing the same, aesthetic or sneak peeks or whatever the situation may be. They may not want to see it more than a week in a row. So this is totally something that you'll need to experiment with your audience and see what works for you and your art or your process and all of that stuff. Another thing to think about is if you have enough time to make your new products. So if today is, today's the 9th of the month, and if I'm wanting to have a launch on the 19th, well, that only leaves me 10 days to hype the launch, do all the listing work and prep work and all of the admin-y stuffs to get it done. Plus, I also have to make the products, manufacture them. Yeah, that's a whole other beast. If you are a business who manufactures products let's see, enamel pins are a big one. enamel pins or patches or magnets or any of those things. If you get items manufactured, that's another thing you need to take into consideration, because those manufacturers are going to have their own dates that you have to follow as well. So take all of that into consideration as you're planning your launches. And then once I have a time frame that fits and I have a date that that I can lock in and say, okay, this is going to be my launch date, then we need to shift to the weekly spreads. So I'm in my notes. I always have notes in front of me. It just helps me stay on track. Otherwise, I talk about everything and anything. But in my notes, we're shifting to weekly spreads now. So this, before this, we've been working in the monthly spreads, just trying to get everything down on the calendar. Now that we have our launch date in our brains, we need to work backwards from the launch day and, break down those huge, huge tasks. So I already named a few. You have your listing preparations, you have photo ops for all of your items, you have mock-ups that your items probably need to go into. If you need to, plan models to wear your product, to take photos of, and making the product, contacting manufacturers, and hyping the launches, all of this stuff happens working backwards from your launch date. And that's kind of how I go week by week. So, for example, let's say launch day is on Saturday, then that means that on Friday, the day before the launch, I'm going to be doing a last-minute website check. I'm going to be checking every listing, that kind of thing. And then that means on Thursday, I'm going to be making all of those listings. On the Wednesday, I'm going to be doing all the photography and the editing and all of that stuff. And on the Tuesday, I'm going to be finalizing products. And then on Monday, I'm going to be, Monday on, until you get to your date currently. All of that extra time in the beginning is spent creating your products, announcing your collection, and really just hyping it up like crazy. Sharing those sneak peeks, sharing reels, and I didn't even know this, so shout out to Emily, because I had no idea this was even a thing on Etsy. But Etsy has their own version of reels now. They have a whole explore page and everything. Just one more place for me to feel anxiety about posting, but it's fine. Whatever. Anyway, I'm going to be sharing my sneak peeks on there, on TikTok. Maybe if you have a YouTube channel, you're showing the behind the scenes of how you're making all these products. So it's really all down to picking your dates, breaking your tasks into chunks, like if you want to put them on sticky notes and assign a sticky note to each day. That way, every single day, you're working toward your launch, towards your new collection, and you're having a direction for each day to end you in that end goal of your launch. I know it's a little hard to explain via, me just telling you. I will be including, if you're watching this on YouTube, then I'm including a video of me doing all my planning and stuff. I am following this exact same process where I go, I pick a launch date, which I've already done in this case, and then I'm working backwards from there in my weekly spreads to really nail down all the tasks I need to do to lead up to that. And I really hope this helps. If you have any questions at all, please, please, please comment them down below, and I will help in any way I possibly can. I really do plan on making a YouTube video about this, just so you can have a true visual and information as I'm talking about all of this. I think that would be really helpful. But for now, if you're feeling really lost, this at least can give you a starting point on where to even begin to plan for your month. For the sake of today's podcast, that will be all. And I really, really hope these tips helped. Just to do a little recap, because I know I got a little rambly at the end. In your monthly setup, you're going to add any monthly payments that are reoccurring or yearly, whenever the payments come, add them. And then pick a launch date that works for you, taking into consideration that you need enough time to build hype, you need enough time to build products, etc., etc., etc. And once you have that date, flip over to your weekly spread and chunk those tasks down little by little by little. That way every day you have a bite-sized, manageable piece to do every day versus, procrastinating and waiting and stressing. This is a no stress planner zone. And I think these tips will really help. And if you have, any questions, again, please comment them below and I'll do my best to help. If you have any tips for planning, leave them below. I want to learn from y'all. I love planning and I'm always looking for more tips, so leave them below. But thank you so much again for tuning in. I will see you next week, next Wednesday, for the 3rd episode of the Teapot Podcast.